Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another of these fun interview episodes of the SWW show. I'm Mike, and today I have with me a special guest, and we're here to talk about let's just say a style of game I think it reminds me of that people are very familiar with, but I guess we'll find out. To get us started, could you please tell us your name and the game which you're talking about?
My name is Jerry, and I work for my own company, Shenanigans Studio, and the game I've created is called Chaos.
So first, obvious question: how is Shenanigans Studio not taken already? Like that just feels like a default, like a game name that I assumed a company would have had already for a company.
I don't know. I let my lawyer take care of it, and he said you're good to go. So I guess it's not there. So and actually, there are other businesses with the name Shenanigans in it, but not Shenanigans Studio. And there's like a restaurant and there's some other various little things, I guess, but there's none of them. And this was something interesting that I learned through this whole process of, getting all this going was, you can have the same name, but you can't sell the same product. So like I can't create a business called Apple and try to sell software, but you could do something else, I guess.
That
Um,
makes sense. I've always heard those dumb lawsuits of like I think Bethesda was trying to like sue people for stuff like with the name Scrolls. I've heard those like dumb stories before, and it's always like as long as there are clearly steps, you probably can't be like I you can't be like and now I'm going to make a side restaurant tied to the game. You might get in trouble then. But yeah.
yeah, you can't create a name that is intentionally trying to confuse customers. So you have to be in a totally separate industry that you're selling products in or whatever service you're providing or anything like that.
Wow, that is great legal advice. I did not expect. Um,
Well, I'm
so
not a lawyer, so don't take it for granted, but
not legal
but
advice. A great
but yeah.
general rule of thumbs we get to know all here and say it like a bar. Not legal advice. That is a way different thing. One time I had one of my friends on who's a lawyer. Every time he'd answer a question, he'd be like, "Remember, folks, not actually answering this question. I'm just saying hypothetically something similar."
Yes, it's a very important disclaimer to lay out there.
Perfect. I guess we kind of talked around it. Could you kind of give us what you define as your elevator pitch for chaos?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, could you give us what is, since we've kind of mentioned the game but we didn't talk about it yet, what is your elevator pitch for chaos?
My elevator pitch, I'm sorry. I don't know what you mean by that.
I said what is chaos? What would you tell me?
I would say Chaos is a nod to some of my favorite games. One of which or a series, I guess. I'm sure you can very easily point out in the Souls-like series, Soulsborne series, some of the Witcher games, other types of action RPGs. But Chaos is it's a nod to that play style and that story, that setting that is just kind of ominous. And I mean, you really got to dig into it if you want to know what's going on. But it's not a casual game. At least I don't want it to be a casual game. I don't want it to be super hardcore and scare everybody away because I don't have the same following that some AAA studios have. But I don't want it to be something you can just pick up and play and be happy about it. It's gonna be a challenge.
Yeah, no, you were kind enough to provide me with some codes, and yeah, first thing immediately is I could see the Souls influence. I think is a good way of putting it, and yeah, so I played the sorcerer because I was like, oh, that looks interesting, and getting used to fireball takes a bit of work, so I totally was like dying from the skeletons in the beginning. So I feel like, how does this work? Oh no, they're here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know how much experience you've had playing any of the Soulsborne games. Um, I always played more as a melee type character, but the casters or magic in general always fascinated me, and I wanted to include that in this game. And one of the last characters I played as going through my last playthrough of Dark Souls 3 was as a pyromancer, and just they're kind of a glass cannon, so you have a little bit of trade off, especially early in the game. And I'm sure as you realize playing the little bit of time that you did, it's a little difficult, but you have the ability to cause damage from a distance. And so the point is to learn how to control the fireball spell that you start with by aiming with the camera, basically. And then if you need to be more precise or you want to almost guarantee damage, you can then lock on to your enemy when you're within a certain range. And it's kind of difficult to find that balance. Okay, well, how far away can you lock on for this or that? And kind of going with what it is right now, and then we'll see what happens. But yeah, the sorcerer is supposed to be kind of that glass cannon, where you can deal a lot of damage, but you're not wearing a lot of armor, and you're not, your stats, your attributes are not really focused on your defense. It's more or less for damage output. It can be. I mean, it's an RPG. You have the option of increasing your stats however you want, but as far as the start of the game, you start with lower defense with a little bit higher magic damage, and then you can deal damage from a distance then.
That's a very interesting thing. That was what I think caught me immediately too. Was when I started that you had the three classes to choose from, obviously, which was your melee guy we talked about, kind of sorcerer, and I believe the other guy's an archer. Was I?
Uh,
Am I going crazy?
well, yeah, I don't have archers in the game right now. I just have the warrior, the knight, and the
Night. That's what. Okay,
sorcerer.
yeah. That's what I was
Yeah,
searching in my head. I'm like, I knew it was something that like it's like fits the theme really well, and it's very much one of those classes. Why?
yeah.
So going through those three classes, then why were those the three you're kind of like starting out with, kind of for this?
Well, I had to stay within my realm of capabilities, first of all. I did have plans initially to have some type of an assassin class that could potentially start with like a bow or something or daggers. But I never got that far, and it just I don't have the animation. I don't have the ability to. I didn't feel like I had the ability to go around and do all that extra stuff and add something. And it might be something I add down the road. It really just depends how successful this is as it stands. And I don't have a huge goal like I got to become rich from this before I start adding DLC or anything like that. But um, starting with the warrior, I guess the warrior was kind of the strength focus from like for like a strength build in Dark Souls. And I like the idea of somebody starting with some higher strength, can deal a little bit of damage, but can't necessarily take a whole lot of damage, more so than what the sorcerer can. But the warrior starts off with a little bit better weapon. They deal a little bit more damage. They can tank a little bit, but it is still a little bit more difficult because when you move to the knight character, the knight is was kind of my basis as the knight, or the starting easy mode of Dark Souls, in my opinion, where you started with a shield that could block 100% damage, and you dealt moderate damage, and you had moderate stats across the board. So, when my first playthrough, I did a little research into the game because I didn't feel like spending 3,000 hours beating the first tutorial boss. So, I wanted to figure out what's the best way to get started and get used to this type of a game, and that's kind of what the knight class serves as. He starts with a shield that can block 100% damage, and he deals moderate damage.
Okay.
And then obviously, then there's the sorcerer who deals a little bit more damage, but can also be a little bit safer to play because you can stand at a distance. But I guess you have to kind of figure that part out.
No, I feel like it definitely the sorcerer was interesting because it feels like a class I was drawn to just by what I feel like what it did. But I almost have a hunch now, talking to you a bit more and kind of going through some of the stuff. It's probably not the suggestion for people's first class.
Yes, if this is your first time playing any type of Souls-like game, I would not suggest starting with her.
So obviously part of these games is kind of like their inherent learning curve. It's kind of what makes them interesting for a lot of people. Is there a world where you thought of like kind of like toning that back a bit and being like, hey, here are your three classes. I suggest this one as a new player, or you very much like purposely giving very little information like those games do?
A little bit of both, or a little bit of all that, I guess. I've tossed and turned about a lot of that stuff, and I look. I guess this is going to be a long answer. I looked at what have other games like this done, and it seems like most of them fail to really capture the essence of the Souls game, which is the difficulty and the hand holding of walking people through how to play the game, and just the ominous lore. those are the things that really, and you can go into the whole level design and stuff like that, which is, those guys are phenomenal at what they do. And I'm one person, but when you look at other games that are like mine that are indie games, I think the general consensus is they don't ever live up to that. And to me, I wanted to address it a little bit more directly. I wanted it to be difficult. I wanted it to be almost skill based. It takes practice. And a lot of times and I'm sure if you go back and you play it some more, you'll notice you learn a little bit about each boss each time. You learn a little bit about what your player is capable of doing, and you learn about, you just develop the skill to handle yourself in combat with some of these enemies. And each time you go back, you do a little bit better, and eventually, you build that skill up. And so as I was going, I had some people testing the game, and it turned out that it was a little too hard. And I'm not an expert game designer by any means. This was more or less, my attempt at trying to honor this genre of game that I've thoroughly enjoyed. So there were times where it was brutally difficult and almost unfair to play. And that was another thing, was I wanted to make sure that what we what I did was fair for the player. You know what I mean? I want it to be difficult, and then ultimately, what it came down to, where at least where things stand as they are, is I tried to balance it so where it wasn't really too hard, because this is an indie game, and I don't want people to pick it up, play it for 5 minutes, and then say this is stupid, and not really realize what it is, and then give it up or return it or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's difficult because I'm trying to flirt with a line that I may not necessarily have any business being around. But it's what I wanted to do, and I feel like I've for the most part accomplished it. So
No, that makes sense, and I could definitely see where it definitely takes some time getting used to. Like I joke saying like the first couple enemies kind of gave me struggle, but I kind of got used to that part. The part that stuck to me is actually
right.
you kind of emailed me after talk, but it was I'm like I'm like this hobgoblin until you like go crazy with you, like you could just avoid him entirely. So I kind of want to talk that twofold kind of is the idea of this, I'd say, very quickly getting to this very intense boss, and then the kind of like going down what you're letting players do of like akin to I guess Souls do or Metroidvanias do, where you kind of like letting them bypass the stuff entirely, kind of.
I'm sorry, you cut out through a lot of that.
So let's start with the simple part then. Is so obviously we get to this hobgoblin very quickly in the game.
Yes,
Um, let's just start with the obvious. He's a lot harder than those enemies. Like
right.
objectively a lot harder. I'm curious because I think what I could be wrong in my head when I've played the Souls games is they take a little bit of time to get to that point. Why so quickly introduce the player to the boss?
Um, I guess I'll go with this. When I was coming up with level design, I based a lot of it off of my experiences in Dark Souls 3. And in Dark Souls 3, you start off, you face a couple of basic enemies. There's a little bit of an introduction on what buttons do what. You can turn down the wrong corridor and face an enemy that you have no business fighting this early on. But you step outside, you reach your first bonfire, and then boom, you're facing your first tutorial boss. I mean, it is very quick. And honestly, and even in Dark Souls 1, I was just playing through that again in the original, or I'm playing the remastered version. Um, you do the same thing. You start off in your cell, you come out, you get a few enemies here and there just to get a taste for swinging your weapon, and then you have a little bit more difficult enemies, and then boom, you face your first enemy. So I was trying to basically capture that same essence without completely copying it, but I really wanted to engage somebody with, almost set the tone for the game early on. Like, this is no joke.
No,
This is
that
not.
definitely sets the tone and I definitely haven't played enough of them, so like maybe those did. I kind of have something to Bloodborne. I feel like that took longer. And that's what I was kind of basing that off of, is why I was curious
Yeah,
there.
sure. Yeah, yeah. And I actually haven't played Bloodborne. I've watched a lot of gameplay, but I just haven't gotten around to playing that one yet. So I don't know what the game design is like for that particular IP, but at least in the Dark Souls series, it seems like they throw you to the wolves right away. It's a very brief introduction to the game, and then they say, "Okay, here's a boss."
No, that is
And that's
definitely a good comparison. Yeah.
yeah, and so I kind of wanted to stick with that because that was, it's pretty obvious that that's my inspiration or my biggest inspiration for the game, and I really wanted to, not necessarily stick with the exact same formula, but I didn't want to do something too totally, um, I guess I don't know what the right word is. I didn't want to be too drastic in changing the style of the game, um, but because there's a lot of research that goes into some familiarity with players and what they like and don't like. So I changed a few things obviously and added my own twists here and there, but that was something I felt was necessary for this type of game, was to really give a brief introduction and then throw you right to a boss and really set the tone early, like, hey, this is not going to be an easy casual game. um, and for players that have experience playing these types of games, you will probably pick up on it pretty quickly.
No, that sounds great. So we've talked about the hobgoblin. We talked about how I kind of dealt with the skeletons at the beginning. Are there any other like, without obviously spoiling the entire game for people, any other like cool like enemy or two that you want to talk about that you think would be very interesting to discuss like mechanically?
Ooh, um, there are. I'll tell you what. I actually have my project open right now. Um,
Final note: is the project a Unreal project? I believe
this is Unity.
it is. Okay, just because the UI thing made me feel Unreal, as well. I was curious.
Yeah, it's Unity's what I started with. It was easy, it was free, and I'm so, I guess, invested in it. I know so much about it, I guess, compared to Unreal, that I never felt it was worth to jump ship. But I don't know. Yeah, this for now, this is a Unity project. Um, let's see.
Apparently, a lot of enemies based on how long it's taken
I
to count.
have I have about 25 basic enemies, and then there are 9 bosses.
Wow.
And
Which actually could feel like that could take that actually just because the amount you could face at a time or the amount of varieties of combat scenarios, I can see that actually is a lot more than it feels like on a raw number point of view.
right, yeah, and uh, you know, it's one of those things where I wanted to give a little bit of variety, because that's another common complaint about other games like this. There's not all, it's always something, and I'm sure, people find something to pick on basically in any project, and I get it. But for me, I really wanted to make sure I hammered away at least making sure there was enough variety in each area that you weren't facing the same enemies all the time. And there will be some times where, enemies you find earlier in the game might pop up later in the game at a little bit more difficult. I won't say exactly what or who or when or where, but I don't know. I guess there's a lot of there's a lot of them. I really like, I guess for anybody playing the demo, you'll be able to encounter the Hobgoblin, obviously, as the first tutorial boss. You have your skeletons, and there's some variations of them with different types of armor, but their animations are for the most part are the same. There are some undead characters in that first area, and I don't know if you got a chance to, but right when you come out of the cemetery and there's those 3 skeletons, you can actually go to the right instead of to the left and go right directly to the boss. And to the right, there's a whole area that you can explore with some. There's an enemy called a kobold. There's I think that's how you pronounce it, anyways. But there are wolves. Um, and there are some undead characters, like like almost like zombie-like creatures, or kind of like like the undead from Dark Souls. So you do face, and there's another one down there that I won't talk about. That's a little bit of a surprise. But there are a few enemies down there. The wolves I really like because they're fast. They move quickly. They can close in on you, so it's very difficult as a ranged character to fight against them. It's kind of one of those enemies where you want to take them out quick, because if they get up on you, they will attack and can do a lot of damage quickly. Um, I guess there's some other enemies later in the game that you'll see. such as these ogres, which are really they look like
Please tell me they look just like Shrek, and they just have Shreks walking around.
they do kind of, but they're not green. They look like really large people. I don't really know how to describe them. They're very their character model from the pack that I purchased is called a fat ogre, I believe. So it's kind of interesting. They look like executioner style enemies. Very cool. They move real slow, and they walk real slowly towards you. They got a mean growl, and if you get close enough, they can hit you pretty hard with a stone that's tied to like a club. It's a pretty neat character in my opinion. But yeah, I've got spiders, I've got there's dragons, um, and there's a couple other special things here and there that you'll come across, and so yeah.
So, as we get to the tail end of the discussion, the one thing I'm curious about that I still really have in mind is so, as I'm correct, as we're talking, you were just on you had the demo period. I believe it was during like the fall autumn festival on Steam. So I'm
Yes.
curious, kind of immediately, how did the demo go, and then kind of what unexpected feedback did you receive during this?
To be honest with you, I didn't receive much feedback. At least like conversationally. I didn't know what to expect in terms of data that I would get from Steam, in terms of like store page visits or downloads, and specifically. Uh, so I guess I don't really know. I don't know what the expectation is. I will say this: I didn't really care for the way that the festival was handled. Um, in like and I don't mean any disrespect to Steam because I appreciate everything that they do for the community, but my particular project, and I asked questions about this on why, but my particular project was grouped with some other, I guess, lower quality, relatively speaking, to some of the other games, was grouped with these that were put at the very bottom of not even the main page. It was a secondary page, and you had to like flip through a kind of an obscure. It was I don't know. Did you go to the page at all? Did you see the
I
festival
kind of did.
page?
I was just seeing some festival stuff. I don't know if I saw like a ton of it, but I definitely was keeping an eye out on some of the stuff.
So on each page they had different little windows with as you scrolled down the page, and they were trending now and most wish listed and this and that, and then there was specific genres, like action, RPG, uh, this or that, and then at the very bottom underneath of everything there was one called more, and it looked like some very like I said, I don't want to be disrespectful, but from lower quality games, and mine was thrown into that, and it was on like a second page. And so, in my opinion, I felt like the project was hidden, and a lot of people just don't see it. Like they just don't know it's there. And so I tried to message Steam like, what are the requirements to get it into one of the, like action or RPG or anything? How do I get it to be visible in those areas? And I couldn't get a response. So I guess in that sense, I was a little disappointed because I just feel like people didn't see it. Um, I got more downloads than I anticipated, but not from the United States. It was very popular in China actually.
That's a very interesting. I did not expect that big in China. Like that's that's not a market I expected to be. Because I also like that Chinese market's very hard to get into, so I find that interesting. Always whenever people are like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm big here. I'm like, I don't understand why. Like it's like independent of the game. I don't understand how to break into some of these markets.
I don't know. I honestly have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just trying to take all the steps I can to get to the release date. My ultimate goal for this whole project was, because this is really my first big project that I wanted to say, okay, this is going to be the thing that I'm going to finish and release. I've done a lot of little projects here and there, developing my skills, um, but this was going to be the one that I was going to see through to the end. I'm going to finish it. I'm going to put it out there because it was kind of something that would encompass my passions in the gaming world. And ultimately, I'm going to hit that goal. I'm 2 weeks away now from the 30th, or well, 2 weeks and a couple days from releasing the game. So I don't really know if I want to base my success on my sales or not. I don't anticipating it making me rich at all. Um, but I felt like the festival didn't it wasn't what I expected, and I guess I didn't know what to expect. But I was a little disappointed on that end because it was my understanding that it was going to be a feature of all the games that were going to be released, during this window. And I did everything they asked me to do in terms of making sure my store page was ready. I had a trailer, I had a pitch, I had, some announcements and all this and that. But the only thing I didn't do was set up live streaming stuff because there were a few games that were streaming for days. And I'm like, I just don't have the time to do that. This isn't my full-time job. So maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know, but I didn't get a straight answer. So I don't know. I really, like I said, I just didn't know what to expect. So I don't really know if I can say it was successful or not.
No, that makes sense. Also, it's always easier to say if a thing was successful like after the fact than it is during the moment because all that
Right.
stuff's really weird. So yeah,
Right.
so let's kind of see if we at least help you break even and get some more wish lists for this game since it does come out. I guess when does you don't have a technical date on the store? Do you have a technical date yet, or you start aiming just for the end of the month for this coming out?
I don't understand that actually. I have October 30th is set on my dashboard, but it's not showing up on the store page. It's something I have on my to-do list today actually. But October 30th is the release date.
Correct. So October 30th, the game is Chaos. You again are Shenanigans Studios. The Shenanigans Studio is probably easier to find you with looking for both those, just because obviously they're Chaos's. I think there's a few other things with Steam with a similar name. So again, look up Shenanigans Studio Chaos, and it should pop up. And then finally, what is going to be the final cost of the game? Or are you still working that out?
Right now I have it set at $15.99. I didn't want to overprice myself, but I didn't really know what to do. I'm not a businessman. I don't know. I felt like that was a fair price for what other games are being sold for with a similar, uh, I guess, amount of game that you get for the money. So I guess with that price, I felt like you're getting somewhere between 20 to 25 hours of gameplay, unless you're super good at it, which, shouldn't be the case. But I felt like that was a reasonable price to get for the amount of gameplay that you get with the game.
The game will be $15.99. Again, the game is Chaos. Jerry, thanks again for sitting down and talking to me after your long day of work, as it sounds like. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your night.
All right, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another one of these fun interview episodes of the SWW show. I'm Mike, and today with me, a whole slew of guests. So I'm just gonna let the team lead here, Miriam, take it away and tell us who you guys are, who's with us, and what we're talking about.
Hi guys, I'm Miriam. This is Miriam and team for the developers of Sausage Fest, a very strange, obscure game on Steam.
Yeah, I think Strange is a good name for the game. It caught my eye because to be fair, I think that's why you guys caught my eye. Was immediately I was like, what is this game? First,
we have a tough time explaining as well, but yeah, it's a very strange idea, I guess you could say.
First question I had when I saw this is, did you guys watch the Sausage Party movie? And you're like, when you make a game about it?
No, we get that a lot, but no, that's not the case. The actual reasoning behind that kind of game was because I had a developer's block and I didn't really have any ideas of what to do and what to develop. And so I just, like last summer, I just ended up telling the guys that, you know what, why don't we just make a really dumb multiplayer game just for us? And that sort of ended up making what we have today. So it was just a really silly idea that we just wanted to, have something to play because we didn't know how to spend the entire summer, especially with the current situation.
No,
I don't think any of us have actually seen the movie, to be honest.
Yeah, actually, we haven't seen it.
You guys need to then, because, like, not gonna say it's a great movie, but at 100% I see that first, I go, it totally, like, there's a lot of that where it's like, where just a certain, like, look you guys have too, and I'm like, it almost feels like that. Other thing, obviously, is, I assume you guys had to have played some capacity of the Worms games based on like what I've seen of the game so far.
Yeah, we have played the Worms games, but it's more on, I guess you could say it's more of an arena type shooter, top down. The Worms games were mostly like turn based, I
Yeah,
believe.
they're more turn-based asymmetrical. Like I understand there are differences there, but it was those like the
Oh,
two
yeah.
things I immediately see and I go. It just feels like some ways you could kind of see influence from that. So I guess
Yeah, there definitely is, yes.
so. Looking at the how this is going, then I'm curious, and probably whoever feels it's appropriate to answer this kind of is. You guys started poking on in a multiplayer game. How did you get from just a multiplayer game to a bunch of sausages shooting things at each other? Like I'm curious, kind of like how you guys made from like that feels like a pretty big like generic to like a very specific thing.
Actually, the way it sort of started was the base of the game was meant to be just a multiplayer game, but I really didn't know what. So, as a joke, I just went into Blender and modeled these giant genitals and decided to use them as the character model. They weren't actually sausages. I later on turned them into foods because I wanted to sort of make it like a form of censorship. But yeah, that's how the idea sort of came about. It was originally supposed to be just a multiplayer game. And then I was like, you know what, why don't I just make them shoot? Because that makes sense.
Definitely makes sense, and I do appreciate kind of like that jump. You're like, what is the dumbest thing I can make right now? Perfect. You're like, ooh, this could be a game. Like I feel like that happens with way too many games. Every time you're like, yeah, no, we had no idea what we're doing, and then a thing just appeared, and we went, we're gonna do that.
Pretty much just bored in Blender and just making whatever.
It's a very viable strategy.
It is very viable. Definitely, it's interesting because a lot of people I feel like a lot of developers when they do that like insane stuff, they're like, we're just gonna put this on the side, and you guys are like, no, here's the game. So
Yeah.
So that way everyone kind of feels the thing. One question I had, obviously, so we have two testers, as I was kind of told to talk about as like / marketing as you guys do on the team here. How do you guys kind of go through something like this insane that's always networked, and kind of like what is like for testing something this big?
Salim, do you want to go first, or? Okay, I'll go first. Okay, so the thing is that, working with Miriam is that, he has a lot of these crazy projects. So, whenever, something new comes up or whatever, he's planning, to make in the future, we always have like a very small glimpse of what it could be, because it usually turns out to be something even, much bigger than what it actually supposed to be. So going into this, in the earlier stages, we didn't really know much, as he said, because it was just one leap and the whole game kind of changed. So what I could say is that when we were actually playing and testing the game out, it felt really new-ish. Like it was like when we first hopped on in the game, it was very familiar. It didn't feel very different from any other games, but the whole concept and the idea behind the game was really unique. Like it wasn't something which you would normally see. So
And the
that
testing
is,
form, yeah, the testing method wasn't that, I guess you could say, unique. We just had like a bunch of builds from Unity and just uploaded it on our Google Drive, and then just everyone downloaded it, and we pretty much just played together. That was before we actually ended up trying to register for Steam, which later on then we used Steam's tools, which was actually really more helpful than what we did with Google Drive.
So there's just 20 dudes playing the game like at different times, and we all give our input, and basically that goes in the game.
Pretty much, yeah. Because we have a bigger circle than just our team. It's also our friends who give us opinions on the game.
I would have loved to have been there when any of you guys had to pitch to your friends, being like, okay, so you're going to help us test this game. You get to be giant sausages. And they're like, first question, like, when you say sausage, you're like, yes, that's what I mean. Okay, next question. And you just kind of go through that.
Everyone's response was nice.
yeah.
Of course,
Nice.
that is everyone's response to that. So kind of one of the other things then that interests me, so obviously as we're talking, this game is recently in early access. And I'm very curious from you guys' point of view, kind of how that is going, especially being a purely networked game, and how much that could fundamentally shift that once you went from internal testing to like a live game on Steam.
So that definitely is something, I guess you could say that's a challenge with a multiplayer game. The reason why we decided to make it early access was because honestly, this is quite an abstract idea in the sense of what exactly it is. But it is still, at the end of the day, a multiplayer game. And because of the lack of a player base, it's quite kind of difficult to get feedback. But that's why we made it early access, so that if eventually we can, stack up more players, we can have some form of communication with them on what exactly it is they want, which we do. We have a Discord, and we have a good number of people that have joined, and we get some feedback here and there about what exactly it is they want. And our aim is to sort of make it much more dense and with more amount of content than there is now, and hopefully we can reach our outcomes and pretty much release it completely out of early access.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious then, as we were going on this early access road, then, based on any of you guys then, so obviously you guys released the game right now in the State, and I believe on the Steam page it says late 2021, so you have about another, we'll say, like 14-ish months of early access, kind of. What are like the big things that you guys have talked about that you're excited that like is going to come up for the game, kind of, that's going to change a lot of the way people play it?
Oh yeah.
Well, for the base ideas, I believe we just had a bunch of game modes and some more maps and customization content. But I guess the more bigger things would have been, I guess, mechanics that our friends have suggested. But we're not entirely sure right now as to how much more new things we're going to add. So currently, like on our list, it's just mechanics, game modes, and maps, and also to finish the music for the game.
Okay, so let's jump into that then. Obviously, because we have one of the people who are here. Kat, I believe you said is music producer is the title. I just wrote down from us talking before.
Yes.
I'm curious, kind of, where do you come up with the music for this game? Is like immediately you're like when you saw the things you're like, I have an idea in mind, or do you kind of go in like your corner and you come back and hope the music works?
So the way I go into this is like, okay, I think about the concept that I'm going for, be it a specific scenario or, a map. Usually it's the maps. And then I consider and I write something based about that, like something about the theme of the map. And then what I would then do is take the game and play the music in the background while playing the game. And I will see if it fits. And, well, hopefully it does. But if it doesn't, then I have more adjustments to do and lots more rewriting to do.
So, going through this game then, did everything seem to fit okay, or was it kind of like one of those you had to keep kind of adjusting it and going through different things?
Okay, the thing is, though, this is a purely multiplayer game. Sadly, at the time, a few months ago, I didn't actually have a second computer. So I couldn't actually make the music while playing. I'd have to drag someone out, Ayo, help me start a match so I can make music.
No, that makes sense. I could see the world where that is a pain, we'll call it, in a lot of ways. With that, so did you have? If you guys are willing to talk about, obviously, did you have any like different styles that you tried? And you're like, oh no, that just did not work for this game.
In style in terms of the gameplay,
or even like what was like the music and stuff too, because obviously you it's a very specific look and stuff.
At the beginning, Miriam actually wanted to include more maps. So, he has like he basically has that ready. He just needs a bit more work on that. But he decided to just release it with the few maps that we already have, and we'll release the rest as they come in future updates.
Yeah, because they're not fully finished, the other ones. We're still making them, but I'm waiting for like the music to be done. Because right now we have placeholder music actually that we've licensed, not the actual OST that we've fully finished. So once we get those done for the first 5 maps that we have, I want to finish polishing the other maps and then release them through our monthly updates. At least that's what I hope to do.
Oh, you tell me game dev is never set in stone. That's insane. That's the first rule of game dev is I thought we all make a schedule, we stick to it, and nothing ever, ever, ever goes wrong.
Pretty much. It's really tough to do that as university students, but a
Yeah, we
monthly
don't live in
schedule
a
is what
perfect
we're
world.
hoping for. True.
It's not really the best of times right now for anyone. I've actually been moving during this whole situation. I've had to tear down my studio and I have to build it back up again.
I am in the exact same boat. I've been moving too, so I understand the thing. You're like, this is a great time for moving. I don't know why I decided to do this.
Damn it. That's life.
Yeah, no, that actually leads to one of the things I've been talking. I think every dev I've talked to in the last couple months is how much has, let's say, the world around you changed the way you guys have developed the game? Like, because obviously, I assume you guys are more of a remote team anyway, so maybe it doesn't affect it a ton. But I'm kind of curious how that's all looking.
Well, with the current situation, honestly, it's the reason why we've been able to develop the game in the first place is because we had so much free time. In the beginning of the summer, of course, not right now. But that's, I guess, why we mostly decided to make it purely multiplayer. I guess that's why I wanted to make a multiplayer game in the first place. And I guess so the situation was already in that state around us, so the game didn't really change much from what we had an idea of. But other than a few changes that we may have made because it didn't really come through as we expected, or we wanted to make it slightly easier on the team to just develop and put things through. But no, the original idea was pretty much with the current state, so there wasn't much more changes from what we had already planned.
The thing is, months ago, this game was like a fun project that we could work on after school hours. But now that, everything's all different, we're all uni students. And now that school's like online and it gets really pressuring sometimes. So now maybe development is slowing down a bit because we can't, put as much time as we want to into the game anymore.
No, that definitely makes sense, and I definitely understand the, like, everything shifts, so it changes schedules. It's one of those things, though, that you guys definitely just going through this process already and getting a thing out is at least good, because a lot of ways, too, like, I've always heard with a lot of development, like, game development's always hard, but once, like, getting a thing on Steam is one of the harder pieces of this, so once it's up there, at least,
Definitely.
once you have, at least, you could still updating it'll take a ton of work, but at least you have that initial thing up there that you could kind of base everything you're doing off of and off of continual feedback.
But yeah, we're the whole online aspect is something we're slightly used to, so it's not that much of a difficulty. The difficult part is managing studies with development. That's the challenge that we mostly face. The other obligations we have around us in our personal lives. But online aspects, not much of an issue because this is something we're already used to.
No, and that makes perfect sense. So I say now is a good time after us talking for a little bit. Let's finish this thing up and let's. So the game is Sausage Fest. You guys are currently on Steam in early access. The game is currently $3. I don't know what that translates to any other currency around the world. And then it says you guys might be updating the price kind of as development goes along. You said. So you guys might be updating the prices pending, I assume, as the game development goes along?
Yeah. We will change it only when it's fully released. But throughout the early access process, we will not change anything.
Perfect. So yeah, so if everyone's interested, it's probably worth at least going and looking up, especially for how relatively cheap the game is. It probably most people can find $3 somewhere in their wallet if they decide to. But again, guys, thank you for sitting down and talking to me, and enjoy, I guess, your evening over where you guys are right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This episode is partially brought to you by the Humble Choice Program. Did you know Humble Bundle has a great monthly subscription service that lets you get a ton of video games every single month? That's right, from plans range from $5 to $20 a month. You get a hold of a bunch of free games they have available to you. And you can use our code down in the description below to go and sign up. It would help our podcast and help you see what great games are available for you this month. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another one of these fun interview episodes of the SWW show. I'm Mike, and today with me a special guest from all the way around the world to talk about a good old music game. We haven't done one of these in a while. Maybe to get us started then, could you please tell us your name and the game we're here to talk about?
Sure. So I'm Tommy Bar Arntzen, and I hail from Norway. And I made the rhythm game both Klang 1 and Klang 2.
Perfect. So yeah, maybe because Klang was not a game I was familiar with. I don't know how people are. Do you mind giving us like the top level view of what is like the Klang series?
Sure. So Klang 1 was very based around being a blend of both platforming and rhythm games. It can shortly be summarized as like playing Ninja Gaiden and Dance Dance Revolution at the same time.
That's a great combo. For record, that should be like you're like, what's the game like? Ninja Gaiden meets Dance DDR. Like that's the end.
And it gets just as hard as you imagine. And Klang 2 is more hyper specialized towards being a rhythm action game, where everything that kind of resembles a platformer is more aesthetic. Like mechanically, it's purely a rhythm game, where the character on screen is more. Its purpose is more like mechanically. It's more to kind of illustrate where you are in relation to your targets and where your targets are likely to pop up next. But Klang 2 is definitely a rhythm game beyond everything else.
That's interesting that you go from, I would argue, as you described it, was a merging of genres to like going towards the one genre. Is there something? Is it just kind of like, is that what you've always had in mind for the sequel of the games, or is it kind of like you just kind of over time determine that's kind of where you wanted the game direction to go?
It was more since like after I finished Klang 1, I felt I had some unfinished business with the concept, and it was primarily the rhythm aspect I felt I could like really make a stand on. And also I kind of noticed with Klang 1 that the game is it was definitely a bit divisive over its difficulty. That is, it's just it kind of demands a bit too much out of the player in order to get the best experience. And I really just wanted to see, okay, how can I just make the most good feel audiovisually immersive rhythm game?
Interesting.
Pretty much sums it up.
So that's very interesting. That it's just very much like how that naturally shifts. And I'm going to be very curious, kind of long term, of like the audience you had from the first game, kind of what they think of that, because obviously that is enough of a shift where that might change people's views on the series, and that to me is just very interesting. So kind of as I was going through stuff with like Klang 2 and what caught my eye about it, besides obviously I think the mixture of genres is the aesthetic of the game. And I'm just curious, obviously I think Klang 1 had a very similar look when I was seeing it. First question is, how much of an influence are you by Tron?
Klang 1 was definitely very influenced by it, mostly because I wanted like a limited color palette in order to kind of more easily emphasize which gameplay elements you need to focus on. And since I was like running with the whole EDM electronic music thing, it definitely made sense to, hey, Tron, people like when people see blue neon colors, people will think of electricity, electro, and that would hopefully translate into what kind of music they could expect. Whereas with the sequel, I will admit I kind of grew to hate the Tron comparison over a time. So with Klang 2 especially, I tried to introduce a lot more colors to the palette and make it less neon-y to some extent.
Interesting. And I'm curious, is it just you hate the Tron comparison because it's probably, I'd hate to say overplayed, but probably something similar to that?
I feel the thing I kind of learned with Tron is that like, everyone knows about Tron,
But no one
but I've
knows
yet
Tron.
to meet everyone knows Tron, but I've yet to meet a genuine super fan of Tron. If that makes sense. People aren't really invested into Tron.
It's my comparison to that one always is, so like everyone in their head has a picture of The Matrix, right? The movie The Matrix. But everyone pictures the sequel in their head, but they think they're talking about the first movie. And that to me is always the same comparison of like everyone pictures the moment like Neo like grabs the bullets and does something basically with that. But that's from the second movie, and everyone's head, we all put that in the first movie. And I think it's a very similar comparison of people like the Matrix, but like what they like about the Matrix isn't until the sequel.
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like the intellectuals only really like the first one because it was the smart movie, and the second one is like, oh look, he's doing his little slow mo spirit thing with the pole thing. Oh my god!
Even though that's what everyone talks about. Everyone if I say describe to me a scene in the Matrix, I basically promise you that's what people are going to describe to me. Like that is the pop culture moment of it.
Yeah, though I think one thing everyone can agree with is that they don't remember the third one. Like
I'm sorry, that movie doesn't exist. We don't remember that movie was all in Neo's head, so it doesn't matter anyway. But jumping back to you then, so I'm curious. So obviously you're a rhythm game first, especially now. What type of rhythm games kind of do you pull from kind of when you're developing something like this? Because I feel like rhythm action type games have become more common, but they're still like a very rare thing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, the alternative rhythm genre is they kind of go all over the place, really. And it's like when people say rhythm action, I suppose how many games do we even consider that genre? Like I definitely remember being very inspired by Thumper when that came out.
Thumper is what I'm thinking of. God, what am I thinking of? Wow, what's the game where you can only? It's like the dungeon crawler. But you can only move on the beat.
Yeah, Crypt of the Necrodancer.
That's another. I gotta say it's a little more different, but like that's another always comes to my head when you talk about like more like rhythm games that are different in the genre.
Yeah, actually, I feel Necrodancer was they essentially claimed the throne I had set my eyes on when I started making Klang 1. I was like halfway through development of the first game when Necrodancer came out, and I was like, "Fuck! I was too late. No!" And but yeah, though in terms of actual influence on my game design, then not too many. Of course, there is a surface similarity to Osu on the second game, and on Klang 1, I was very influenced by Stepmania in terms of the rhythm aspect that you see. Like essentially arrow icons pointing in a direction you need to interact with, and I kind of illustrated that in Klang 1 as in terms of like reflecting attacks back to the attacker. So like if you were attacked from the left, you would press the left, and you would like Jedi ricochet the bullet back to them. Whereas in Klang 2, I found that with the new interface, it kind of made more sense to be an attacker, like you were attacking the enemy yourself. And then Osu became a very natural fit to take inspiration from, or an influence. Also, because it made it for a very fine, very, very good way to include the mouse, especially like mouse aiming. It just makes sense to just attack circles and symbols.
That definitely does. Also, just being as much as circle symbols, obviously, I feel like you have a more artistically, I'd say, limited palette, even though there's a lot still to do with them. It's probably something that's like very recognizable of like something different in the environment. So in a very hot moment, you're like, oh, enemy, perfect. It's not like what's this new weird blob that like is that enemy? Is that friendly? So
Can you please repeat that?
I was just saying, I find it. I agree with this. The default basic of shapes is a good thing, kind of for immediate contraction. One of the things I'm curious about, though, since obviously you're developing these games, I've actually never developed really a rhythm game. Is so I think the default music choice in this genre is EDM. I'm curious, kind of, is that a thing that like you feel as someone who makes these games, is the genre is gonna stay that way, or do you feel that it's something that you'd be open to exploring other genres of music within that, if it makes sense?
Yeah, the thing that's very that's a perk of EDM is that it's very reliant on their drums and like the beats. Because one thing that's absolutely crucial for a rhythm game is that it's very readable. Like you know what you're supposed to follow. And for instance, in metal, like if there's ever a guitar solo, then unless you're playing Guitar Hero, then it becomes very difficult to map that onto meaningful gameplay. Whereas with like, for instance, Crypto Necrodancers, going for like very stable 4 on the floor beats, and it's all about like just hit that beat to make your move, to boom, 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 and as opposed to just EDM, just lends itself very well to that. It's just makes for very readable gameplay, pretty much.
I think that's a very fair argument, and that's interesting because I would almost argue, pending the type of rock, I'd almost argue it could be very similar. I understand that like obviously there's a lot of gradation there, but I'm always interested that like what people say, which is kind of like I think the case you made of EDM is very similar. Is I feel like a lot of like that rock in different formats can very much fit that same description and do a lot of what they're looking for, or even weirder stuff like jazz. I feel like if you get jazz that's less freestyly, it very much has set beats to it.
Yeah, jazz is kind of very, I suppose, its whole spiel is improvising, and like there was the game Ape Out that kind of illustrated how jazz could make for a very nice soundscape, but then again, that wasn't really a rhythm game. It was the whole thing was that the audio would kind of react to your actions, which could be very wild and sporadic.
Which makes a lot of sense for jazz because I feel like that's what I've always heard is the joke is that like jazz is a war in music form because the default nature of jazz musicians is it's all like freestyle, or if you have a note like you have like a very small segment that's set, and then the round to get there you decide on the spot.
Yeah, and when especially in a game like Klang 2, that gets very fast paced, and I demand like where I incentivize the player to essentially pursue like consistent frame perfect input, then jazz probably wouldn't really be the best fit unless I was deliberately making a level to mess with the player.
That would be see obviously you're trying to transition out of that Tronish world. That'd be such a very Tron-y thing like you're like, and now we're gonna like mess with you, like just because it's very cybery.
Wink, wink.
Yeah, like 100%. That's totally what that would feel like. I'm curious, kind of. So as we're talking, you're somewhere in development, as we'll get to in a second, based on your set release date of this game, and obviously for the last 8 months, everyone's lives have been thrown in the air. I'm curious. I've been talking to a lot of developers, kind of like how is this all affected? Kind of like you making the game, or like you showcasing the game.
I will say I've come out very fortunate out of this whole pandemic thing. So I was very fortunate that I was able to round up all my client gigs like right before the pandemic hit, and pretty much had all my travel appointments canceled, which really freed me up time to just get the game done. So I've actually kind of been silently very appreciative of this whole thing, because there's just been practically no distractions, and it's been my least stressful year since I started making games.
For the record, that has been, I feel like, a shockingly consistent story of either indies or smaller developers. Like, it's been a very, because how many of them were either small teams or remote teams, or like these things, or like we were all distracted by time. Now we have nothing to be distracted by. Like, it's very interesting that I feel, for how much of it's probably mentally insane for a lot of developers, how many indie developers from a development point of view have actually found more stability in their lives and made it easier.
Yeah, I suppose it's just because we're really just used to living in a semi-shithole type of circumstances. So just cutting out the middleman, essentially. Just fully embracing it.
So one of the things I'm curious then, because I have cut mine up. So I have one of them has like your Steam page up, and one of the things is you were a PAX East showcase at the Indie Mega Booth. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't PAX East like right before everything kind of shut down?
Yes, I literally, I think literally 2 days after I came back, that was like when the nationwide mandated self-isolation thing kicked in.
That is.
And I was like, oh no!
Can you imagine the timing where PAX like a couple days later, and you're like, I'm stuck in America for 8 months. Like it's just that's so interesting. Like how much that timing just, I hate to say worked out, but it really kind of did for a lot of people.
Yeah, like It kind of was a gamble, because I was actually even supposed to go to GDC and was like really close to going, even after it got cancelled due to but there was like some secondary events that was still in the air at the time, so I still had my airplane ticket booked for GDC and everything, and I made the gamble to go to PAX, and then I made the gamble of not going to GDC, and both fortunately paid out.
That is that.
Because if I had been stranded in the US, that would be bad.
Yeah, it really kind of. I'm hoping for most developers worked out in that way of GDC being canceled, so most developers internationally didn't take that risk because timing-wise, a lot of them might not have been allowed back in their respective countries. But so that kind of leads me then to kind of talking about this is obviously used to go to obviously shows, some guys to show off the games kind of. During these last 8 months then, have you been trying to make a point of like trying to still do these digital shows, or you just kind of been like going head down in the game and you'll kind of get back to marketing it kind of over time?
I've actually been to every single Steam festival that's been up till this point, actually.
So
I was just about to say that I feel that's the best thing that came out of it as well. It's just far superior online-based exposure outlets.
So that is something that's very interesting to me, is because I actually just did interview a developer the other day that also just went through the Autumn Festival, and I'm kind of curious, kind of your opinion how the Steam Festival has kind of like been, kind of, because I feel to me like a game festival that went online at least is still this hyper focused thing of like everyone knows to go to this location for this festival. The Steam Festival is like I'm just opening up Steam and I happen to see it. So does that still help you getting like eyes on the game and feedback and all that stuff you're looking for?
Yeah, just considering how many people are using Steam, I think on the summer festival I actually had like 13 million impressions on my game.
Whoa, okay, no, okay, now I understand the numbers we're talking about here.
Yeah, though of course the click-through rate was like absolutely abysmal, but just the fact that now like millions of people have a fraction of their brain dedicated to the existence of Klang is in and of itself very good marketing value. The thing I suppose I can say about the festival in terms of criticism is that especially during the last one, the one that was just now, that while I saw Klang in circulation on like the curated games thing, the genre specific one, they didn't really have a roulette for that. So if you found yourself on page 2, you were on page 2 permanently, which I can only imagine I lost a ton of potential exposure due to that. Whereas one of the rhythm games that kind of like weren't not just on the first page, but not just on the first page, but they were highlighted amongst the first page. They probably got like a ton of good exposure just by being lucky with the algorithm.
Yeah, no, that's actually a complaint I heard I had some friends on those two, and I was talking to them, and that's been a complaint. They're like, yeah, if you got kicked off that first page, like that, just the astronomical number difference you're talking about, because like obviously as you talked about, like kind of like just 13 million click-throughs, that's all because you're in front of people's eyes. For how many of those people, if they just click next page, they're like, screw it, I don't care. Like just like that as much as it seems like a little interaction, how many people you immediately lose on that interaction?
Yeah, it's like I think like a good rule of thumb is that for every interaction needed, you lose 90% of people looking. So like if let's say it takes 3 clicks, then you would like lose like you'd be remaining with 10%, then 10% of that, and then 10% of that. So if there are enough hoops, then you'll barely get any.
Which really just, I think it sucks because I don't think there's a way to solve that problem without less clicks, because like some of it is just default human nature, and you're like, we can't really change human nature in some ways.
Yeah, but the very easy thing they could have done is just simply make a roulette. So like, okay, you're part of the rhythm section, and then for every click, then the order is randomized. So you would still be guaranteed feature or like being the first that pops up for an X amount of people scrolling by. So you will get views. Whereas with what kind of happened now is that like that one guy will get all of it and the other guy gets nothing. So
That it'd be a fair way that Steam could probably fix problems and stuff like that, kind of just to try to distribute the eyeballs a little bit better, especially for the time being, as these will probably be pretty common. So
yeah,
the thing I wanted to jump to is whenever I look at games like this, I always check out when you are releasing. I said before, I have a Steam page up here, and I'd like to quote your release date here, which says, make sure my glasses on 100,000 wish lists. Would you like to explain this release date here?
well, it's just a basic call to action, really.
So here's
Like-
a question on that one then. So on 100,000 release date, the wish list, the game might come out. Are we anywhere near that to which the people can expect the game in the near future?
What I would like to say that the game needs to be finished first. And before that, it doesn't really matter now, does it?
The best part about something like that is that we have no way to actually know how many wish lists the game has. So only you actually know if you're actually telling the truth or just pulling people's arms.
The Discord community knows.
If this community knows, so there's a way to find it. But it's funny because you're the only one who truly has that up to date number. So it's just interesting that I appreciate obviously that why you're doing that, and it's a very smart move. It's just really funny because everyone's like, we have no way to verify this.
True, but like given the numbers I have published on the Discord, they aren't really the type of numbers I would publish if I meant to mislead people. If that makes sense.
That's fair, and also yeah. Obviously, you give them numbers. Like when I say an update, I mean like okay, maybe they're hours off, but the point is they have a general idea. But I do appreciate that. So can I assume then the game still has some work to be done independent of the wishlist number?
Yeah, like the way I see it is that let's say if I magically hit 100k, then I would immediately make steps towards an early access release. The realistic scenario, though, is that I will, since I feel I'm about a month away from having the release candidate ready, and well, where was I going with this? But yeah, like I have about a month or 2 months worth of work left before it really is quote unquote in a releasable state. And then again I also intend to launch it on consoles as well at the same time. And since porting can't really truly begin until the release candidate is ready, we will be talking about a Q1 2021 release anyway.
Nice. So remember, everyone, go wishlist his game, and then if we get 100,000 of you and he doesn't do it, we know he's lying. That's how we're going to look at this. It's a very simple logic thing. The other question I have for you then, I don't think you've talked about anywhere that I was able to find. Do you have a rough price in mind that you're willing to talk about yet, or is it still TBD as the game continues development?
It's still a thing I'm thinking about. Like I hope that the final product will be worth 15 to 20 for people. But I'll have to make that judgment call when I get that far and I see people play through the whole thing and kind of weigh in whether it actually is worth that price I have in mind.
Makes sense. Perfect. So let me make sure I have this right. The game is Klang 2. Remember, everyone can go check out Klang 1 right now if they want to go play the first game in the series, even though apparently play a little bit differently. You are a developer at Tinimations. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so that's Tinimations. You go check out tinimations.net for all of your other or .com. That's weird. .com for all of your other projects. Did I miss anything else you want to point people to?
Well, there is the Discord.
Where would we find this magic Discord link?
Let's see. Actually, you can find it on my Twitter. Actually, on my Twitter bio.
Okay, perfect.
There's
so
one.
Your Twitter. Oh, is that perfect? At Tinimations on Twitter,
Yes.
and there is a Discord link right there, literally in the bio. Just click that, and I assume it works like normal.
I'll double check that, but I would assume so.
I hope so, because that's normally how this works, and except it's Discord, and so it sucks to break randomly because it's Discord. But that's beside the point. Again, thank you for taking the time to talk to me at your evening. Enjoy the rest of your night, and good luck on getting those 100,000 wish lists and finishing the game.
Thank you.
This podcast was a production of the SWW Show. To learn more, go to theswwshow.com. Remember, you can follow the show on Twitter at the SWW Show. You can follow me at Mikey_Maroney. You can follow AJ at LowSeatBoy. Remember, new episodes premiere on Friday, 9 a.m. Central Time on anchor.fm/SWW and podcast services around the globe.